Support for the Common Knowledge podcast is brought to you by puremtgo.com. You can support the show personally by going to patreon.com/common knowledge. And you can email the show at commonknowledgemtg@gmail.com.
This is Common Knowledge, a Magic the Gathering podcast about improving at the game with a focus on pauper play. It's not about the cost, it's about the knowledge. Welcome to Common Knowledge. Here are your hosts, Brandon Clark and Lobbert. Enjoy this week's episode of Common Knowledge.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the podcast. This is episode 34 of Common Knowledge. I'm your host, Brandon Clark, and join with me is... Who is he? Who are you?
I'm the Lobbert. I'm Sean. What's up?
Wow. No, not much. Just, getting ready to talk about Pauper.
You don't seem very excited.
I'm always excited. That's my excited voice.
It sucks.
What's up with you? How you been?
I've been pretty good. I got in more Pauper this week than I have in past weeks, and I'm hoping to, do a lot more. Like, hopefully in this next week, I want to play like 20 games. Like, that's my goal.
Nice. I played 10 games of Pauper last night, and I was paupered out.
That's not bad.
I was gonna try to say pooped, but say it like popped. But then I was just like, that might not even work, so I just said paupered out instead.
Abort.
I was popped out.
Abort.
Abort transmission. Well, sweet. So we've got a fun and exciting show for you guys all today. We're going to be talking about blocking, and we're going to kind of dive into the intricacies of combat within Pauper, because combat is the most important part of this game. It's how you win. We're not like Legacy. We don't storm them out. We don't mill you out. We don't turbo fog, take infinite turns. We just attack, we block, we use removal spells, combat tricks. It's pure magic at its best.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why you were having a magic slump one week. Well, it was much longer than that. But you were just like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I was just like, you need to just sit down and play some Pauper. Like, get your basics in order and feel confident about them, and then go from there. I think Pauper's a great format to like train yourself on the basics of the game, and like blocking is one of the like core things that you need to get down before you try to do any fancy stuff.
Yeah, I remember that slump. It started at GP Vegas.
Oh.
Not this past GP Vegas, but the Vegas before, where the only games of Magic I won the entire weekend were the two-headed giant events I did with my buddy. we went like 3-1 in a two-headed giant event. Those were the only 3 matches I won. And I played a lot of Magic, and I just came home from that event and I just hated this game so much.
You texting me and just being like, I have 17 losses in a row, and I was just like, oh no, Brandon. Oh no.
It was bad. Oh man. So yeah, the basics. My wrestling coach, I don't know, I'm gonna get like philosophical on you guys for a minute. But my wrestling coach, from the time I was a freshman to the time I was a senior, every single day in practice we had like a 2-hour block where we did the exact same series of drills every day for 2 hours every single year. It never changed. It was always the basics. And we would complain, "Coach, this is so boring. Can't we do something cool? Learn some cool moves?" And he's like, "No. You need to master the basics. You need to know these inside and out. This needs to be ingrained into your mind. It needs to just be second nature, so that when you're in your wrestling match, you're not going to hesitate." And if you watch a lot of these pro players, they make these moves that are so simple right? But like at the same time, they like sometimes will blow my mind because I'm like, oh, I'm sitting here thinking of all these weird things they could do. They just double blocked. And I went, whoa, a double block? Holy cow.
I thought you were talking about a wrestling pro for a second.
Oh no, I
was like, what's a double
Magic.
block?
Yeah, you can't double block in high school wrestling.
That's when you use both your arms, right?
No, I would imagine that's when like someone from your team runs onto the mat and you both just like punch your opponent.
You can't do that. You can't.
Can't do that in high school wrestling.
Unless you use one of your lifelines.
You can, however, double block in Magic.
Hold on. I want to play something real quick. And you're not going to hear it, Brandon.
That's not pauper.
It was the That's Not Pauper clip. I love it.
So before we jump into all that and the nitty gritty of blocking and combat, we've got a card of the week.
We didn't go over what are we playing.
Is that a thing?
Yeah.
That we do?
Yeah, you have to ask me what I'm playing.
What are you playing?
So this week I played more Stompy and more of my red mid-range. And Stompy felt a lot better this week. I made a couple of the changes. I didn't cut the elephant guides like I was mentioning. I still don't think that would be the most horrible decision. There were a few games where I had 3 of them in my hand, and I'm like, yep, this is pretty much why I don't want to be doing this. But
like, I think the trade-off, like, you get free wins by having that many elephant guides in your deck, and by taking them out, you actually have to try to play Magic. So if you think you're confident enough to win a game of Magic on your own merit, then maybe taking out elephant guides is okay, because then you balance out that variance. But for the rest of us plebeians,
I think the deck used to get plenty of wins before it put elephant guide in the deck.
Yeah, it did.
So what do you play this week?
I played Mono White Heroic. I played 3 leagues this week with Mono White Heroic. And I also got to head down to Oasis Games on Tuesday night and play their Tuesday night pauper event. And I played Tribe Combo. And I wanted to include both of those because I kind of want to talk about why I think Mono White Heroic is a pile of poop and why I think Tribe Combo is very, very good, because those decks are sort of similar. And I kind of want to touch really quickly on the differences between them and why one's good and one's not.
Okay, what are they?
So I think with Tribe Combo, it really just comes down to the resiliency of it. Having those blue cards gives it sort of that power to find the right halves of its deck when it needs them. Whereas Mono White Heroic, you just kind of up to the top of your deck, and sometimes you draw the wrong half of your deck. Like with Mono White Heroic, you can play games where you look like this weird aggro deck where you have like 6 creatures on the board, but you've got a 0/4, a 0/4, a 1/1, and a Seeker of the Way, and your cards are just really bad. And then other times you just draw like 1 creature and a million enchantments, and if your creature dies, it's dead. Whereas with the Tribe Combo deck, you can use your brainstorms, use your ponders, filter through the fluff that you don't need, and you really just kind of get down to what you need.
So it's all consistency, or
I think
also
that's
resiliency?
I think that's one of the big ones is consistency. I think consistency is the biggest one, because I do think that Mono White Heroic, when it gets its nut draw, you just can't beat it.
Wasn't
like
that
its
also
nut
the
draw
case
is
for
just
Tribe?
insane. What?
Isn't that also the case for Tribe?
Yeah, but I think Mono White Heroic can nut draw you more often, just because it's I don't know, it's almost just like a higher density of spells, whereas Tribe, you're looking for very specific 4-ofs in your deck, whereas Mono White Heroic has a lot more redundancy. But because of that, they don't have any ways to filter through it. You can just draw the wrong half of your deck. You've got 15 creatures or whatever, 14 creatures or whatever in the main deck. You could just draw 7 of those. Yeah. And if you don't draw those other pieces, they don't do anything on their own. So that was sort of the biggest one that I found, was just the consistency of the 2 decks. I think are what makes one good and what makes one not as good. But I found with mono white heroic though, like I seem to be like 50-50 against the unfair matchups. Like there were some unfair matchups that were just faster than me.
You mean like the combo matchups?
Yeah, combo matchups, decks that are just trying to do unfair things. So like Affinity with their Fling and Atog finish, like I consider that unfair.
Okay.
Then against the fair decks or decks that could interact, I found that you pretty much lose every game. Like Laguna Band Trailblazer is really good for stemming off Lightning Bolt, but there are a lot of other removal spells besides Lightning Bolt. And a lot of times, too, it gets hard because the Trailblazer becomes so easy to block.
Yeah, that's one thing I know about Heroic. When I'm playing against it, is I block it a lot, and I'm fearing the protection spell, but sometimes it never comes, or when it does come, I have some kind of interaction for it, and I can just keep chump blocking and flying over or something like that.
Yeah, the deck is just very easy to interact with. It's really easy to know what kills you in what situation and just how you need to sequence all your spells. And so very rarely are you ever able to just get your opponent with something when you're playing Heroic, I've found, because it's so easy to know what's coming and interact with it. Plus, like, all your spells are sorcery speed. So, like, at the core of your deck, you're trying to take these fragile creatures and then put enchantments on them in a format littered with some of the most efficient removal in Magic history.
Yeah, and like
it doesn't make sense to me how this is a deck.
Well, we looked in the power rankings. It didn't do that well.
It won a challenge last week.
Okay,
and that's sort of where I decided that I'm gonna do this, because it won a challenge and people were calling me out on Twitter like, "Oh, you said this deck was bad. It won a challenge."
So funny.
I'm results oriented, huh?
Someone called you out on Twitter.
Yeah, someone.
But was it Spencer?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It can have good weeks, but it's not. I don't think it's going to be good or consistent enough to consistently post results. And maybe it's just not enough people are interested in it. But I think that there's a fair amount of interest in that deck, and I think that there's just issues with it.
Yeah, I mean, I love decks like this. I won my first PPTQ with Infect. Decks like this are like right up my wheelhouse, but I just think this deck is really, really bad, and I'm excited to not play it ever again. Like I've played like 3-4 leagues with it, and that was enough for me to know it's bad. So
it's about time you started brewing, Brandon.
Nah, I'm just gonna play some more Delver.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's move on. Those were our "What are we playing?" segment part. So now we're gonna do what I said we were gonna do a long time ago, which is Card of the Week.
You picked this, so you want to introduce it?
Yeah. The Card of the Week that I picked this week is Prohibit. Prohibit is a instant for 1 and a blue. It has kicker of 2, generic. And it says counter target spell if its converted mana cost is 2 or less. If you paid the kicker cost, counter that spell if its converted mana cost is 4 or less instead. So the reason I picked this is because it was sort of featured in Alex Ullman's most recent article on CFB, where he talked a bit about this card and how it inspired him to start brewing, some sort of blue-white control deck. And just how he feels that it's very well placed in the meta currently. And so I think we kind of want to delve into why is this card well placed in the meta and why is it good?
I can attest to the power level of this card. I've put this in multiple brews of mine, and there's a few games where it does sit in your hand and you're waiting to find value, but it does. Like, you're going to 1-for-1 them. One of the downsides of this card, I want to say, is that usually with cards like Counterspell, one of the greatest things that they do is you're paying 2 mana to get rid of a spell that costs much more than 2 mana. Prohibit never does that. In fact, you'll almost always pay more mana for it. But usually you're playing this in tandem with Counterspell. So this is your Counterspell, 5 through 7 or something like that. Is the fact that it's conditional, you don't want to put tons and tons in your deck, because then you're waiting to find value on multiple of your prohibits. But in just a deck that's trying to deny your opponent stuff, it's very effective.
Yeah, and one of the points that was sort of brought up for why this card is so good is, if you go and look at the top decks in this format, like, there are very few spells worth more than 4 converted mana cost, and very rarely are you seeing spells even worth 3. Like, the threshold seems to be 1 and 2. And so, yeah, even though, like, you're going to trade down with your opponent's 1-drop spell, if that card's like a Delver of Secrets or something, their second Fairy Miscreant that would have drawn them a card, even though you're down a mana, I still feel like you're at card parity, because you're countering something very powerful that your opponent is trying to do. And I think what makes this card kind of good is, as Counterspell 5 through 6, like you were saying, is this card is so much less mana intensive than Counterspell.
Oh yeah.
Like, having blue is sometimes a tall order in a format where our mana fixing is not very good. And so being able to pay generic blue for what is essentially Counterspell in most matchups, I think is really powerful.
And if you're playing a brew and you're leaving a colorless and a blue, this can catch people off guard, like, a lot of the time. Like, a lot of people won't play around Prohibit because it doesn't look like you're holding up a Counterspell, when in fact you are.
Yeah. So we kind of touched on a few of the weaknesses of the card, one of them being that it is conditional, unlike Counterspell. And so I think it's really important that if you do have both those cards in your deck, you need to pick your spots right. Like, you need to prohibit everything that you can prohibit and save your counterspells for the things that you can't.
Yeah, even though Counterspell is harder to cast, and you're thinking, like, okay, maybe I don't want to leave up blue later, I'm just going to use my blue now and then leave up Prohibit. It's almost always use your Prohibit when it's available, because it is conditional.
Yeah, you never want to get caught with your pants down when, you counterspelled their Spellstutter Sprite when you could have prohibited, and then you held up Prohibit and they just decided to hard cast Ninja the Deep Hours because they're like, oh, he doesn't have Counterspell up. Yeah, that's feel bads. I mean, I guess, like, I should preface that with, you can't pay the kicker cost.
Yeah.
You have generic blue up, and your opponent, if they're savvy, they can seize that opportunity and do something to throw you off. So,
and this has to be one of the best counterspells we have. I am not a fan of mana leak in our format. We have way too many efficient creatures, and in later turns when they are going to have, they're top decking, they play like a 1 or 2 mana spell, and then they have an extra 3 mana because they're at 5 mana. That's not hard to do. Prohibit still counters the spell. And, I mean, Prohibit just countering Counterspell is often enough.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest one, is Prohibit can win Counterspell wars for you a lot easier. If you're trying to win a Counterspell war with 2 counterspells and you need 4 blue, that is so much harder than just being able to have 3 blue mana to counterspell and then prohibit their counterspell back. So I really like Prohibit if you think you want to be trying to win like Counterspell wars, fighting over Spellstutter Sprites, stuff like that. All right, well, that was the card of the week, so let's move on to our main topic, blocking. What is blocking?
I want to make an Avatar joke.
The Last Airbender?
Yeah, I remember when, okay. I think his name, is it Iroh? His uncle?
The Scarface kid's uncle.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I think it's Iroh. I don't know. I haven't watched that show in actual years.
So Zuko is fighting the Fire Lord, and his uncle's like,
no,
remember your firebending basics. Yeah, do that with blocking. Remember your basics. Anyway.
Remember your combat basics.
Okay, so the first thing I want to get into is wait to block.
So like wait until your blocking phase of the combat phase to block?
No,
Or can I like block during their main phase?
obviously not, Brandon. So I like to wait to block until the very last second. There's a chance that my creature will find a bigger thing to block, or I will find some other use for the creature most of the time. There are some things to play around where you will lose your chance to block or will become less effective, but most of the time you just want to wait as long as possible. Like if they have an angler that they're going to attack with and you're at 15, you can go all the way down to 5 because they're not going to make that creature evasive. If you get blown out by them giving it flying or something like that, so be it. But sometimes you can wait and then you can stack block.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think that's way better. Do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah. Well, I think it goes hand in hand with like resource management, and your life total is your greatest resource, and it's not gone until it's gone. You know, the difference between 1 and 10 isn't that great in the grand scheme of things. Like you're not dead until you're dead. And so I've just seen so many people who will just like, you know, they'll attack and they just will have a useless creature, you know, and they'll just throw it in front of something because they're like, I don't want to take 2 damage right now. And it's like, you're at 18. Keep your guy, you know, like take the 2 damage, go to 16. You'll be okay, you know, like manage your resources, manage your life total, balance, you know, how much damage you can take between when you can just throw away a creature. Because at the end of the day, if you're just going to block just to save a couple points of life, if that couple points of life isn't killing you, you're just losing card advantage. You're just throwing away cards.
And it is also important to note that sometimes it is correct to throw that guy in front of there because they have other creatures that are evasive, and that's reducing the clock with the other creatures. And you're not if you can't block those other evasive creatures at any point in the game and you don't have any plan to get rid of them, don't take the damage because eventually you're going to run out of life. And it is kind of tough weighing that.
So it's kind of just like have a purpose, right, for what you're doing. You know, we talk about this with a lot of like, you know, have a purpose when you cast Gush, but like have a purpose when you're blocking too, right? You know, are you conserving your life total? Are you trying to reduce the clock because you're trying to draw into, you know, your way out or what? Or do you need to trade, get this creature off the board? Like, what are you doing? Have a plan. Don't just wait until your opponent attacks you and then just go, I guess I don't want to take damage right now. I guess I'll block, you know?
Yeah.
Have a plan. Think about what you're doing. You know, premeditate these things. Understand. I've seen this a lot too, where someone will have essentially a free attack. You know, they can attack and their creature has no chance of being killed, and they won't attack. And you're like, okay, I guess they're planning on blocking, sure, because they don't want to get the crack back. But then they won't block either. They just get to that point and decide, I don't want to lose my creature. You should have thought about that last turn and attacked.
Yeah.
Vice versa, people will attack and then, oh no, I should have been thinking about blocking, you know? Think about your turns when it comes to, you know, combat with your creatures and what you want to be doing with them. Because your decision on your turn is going to affect what your opponent does on their turn.
Yeah. It's still the same amount of damage that you block. Like if they're attacking with a 2/2, if you block that on the 4th turn, and if you block that on the 8th turn, in both cases you've blocked 2 damage. Mm-hmm. Like it literally doesn't matter.
Right. The difference there being though are just sort of the circumstances of the game at that point. You know, blocking 2 damage when you're at 18 life is a lot different than blocking 2 damage when you're at 8 life and your opponent has, you know, a flyer that they played last turn. you know?
Yeah, and
Because that's what you were talking about, reducing that clock. And so it's all about context.
yeah, even if
And
you just have a 1/1 and later you play another 1/1 and they start getting tentative on whether they want to attack with their 2/2s, that's miles better than blocking 2 damage.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can take 2 of your inconsequential creatures and trade them up into one of your opponent's creatures, or just make your opponent stop attacking you, that's definitely got to be better than chump blocking to save yourself 2 points of life when you're you're above 15 life.
We're only considering that the creature doesn't have any abilities. Like, it's not doing
sure,
anything, right?
We're kind of just assuming we're just in the context of battling some vanilla creatures at each other,
But I've seen people like throw away a Thraben Inspector, and then a couple turns later they draw a Core Skyfisher, and it would have been really nice to be able to bounce that and get an extra card. Like, there was like a bunch of more lines of play that would have opened up if they just didn't care so much about their life total.
Mm-hmm.
And I know these are like Pestilence decks where they want to stay at a high life total, but you're a Pestilence deck. Learn how to sacrifice some life for some power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I kind of think about it too, where removal, this is one of the level up moments that I had. It was when you had removal, you used your removal. But I'll do a lot of things now where I'll take a few extra points of damage and wait and see what my opponent does in their second main phase before I use a removal spell. And they may not even do anything, and I may just still use that removal spell on the creature that dealt me that damage. So yeah, it looks like I took unnecessary damage, but
you gained information.
It was more about gaining that information. I didn't care about that damage. I could take that damage and wait and see what my opponent did, because maybe there's a bigger creature that I want to kill.
I was a senpai, and I did notice you when, like, I see you doing that stuff all the time with, like, you'll take the damage and then you'll cast your removal spell, or you'll attack and then cast your enchantment. Like, I think that's something you as a player do really well, and I tried to do that more, because a lot of the time the games end with you at a high life total. So there's a couple of exceptions to the rule that I kind of just want to bring up, and it's where you're actually going to lose out on the ability to block it all. I think the biggest one I want to throw out there is Skargan Pitskulk. Skargan Pitskulk has the text that creatures with power less than it can't block it. And most of the time you never get the opportunity, but it's super important that if you ever do have the opportunity, you just go for it, because later on you just won't be able to block that creature at all. So if you're going to throw away something into it, it's fine.
Yeah, especially in the context of the deck that Pitskulk's most common in. If they're attacking you as a 2/2 with their Skargan Pitskulk and you can double block it, well, I guess you can't double block it because you'd be blocking it with 2 1/1s, but like, if you can find a way to block it and get it out of combat as soon as possible, that's what you want to do. Because if at any point they put a Rancor on it, or God forbid an Elephant Guide, like, you're never removing that creature from the game. You have no ability to team block it, and I mean, unless you have like Gurmag Anglers in your deck. But even there, you're like throwing away your premium creature to remove a Skargan Pitskulk. So yeah, think about the context. It's all about context again. You gotta always be constantly reassessing the battlefield, reassessing the board state. What are your opponent's creatures trying to do to you, and what can you do to most efficiently get rid of them? And sometimes that means just blocking them.
Yeah, with that same deck, they do play Rancor, which if you have an X1, sometimes the best decision is to throw it in front of a creature, because you're blocking a 2/2 and the full power is getting blocked. Whereas if they put a Rancor on it, that damage will just roll over and then you've only blocked 1 damage. Like, I'm just saying with you, if you have an X1, and that's something I actually do against that deck, where if I think that a Rancor might be coming, I might just block the 2/2, depending on how dire it is. I think stack blocking and killing a creature is much better than blocking 2 creatures and preventing 4 damage, right? Because it's not gonna, you're not gonna get hit again the next time. So even if you stack block, kill 1 creature and take 2, the next turn you're taking 2.
Yeah, well, it goes back to the very, very first point we brought up of use your life total as a resource. I would rather look at a board state. Let's say we both just have 2 creatures. You know, my opponent has a 2/3 and a 2/3, and I have 2 2/2s. You know, or let's say they have a 2/3 and a 2/2, and I have 2 2/2s, and they attack me with both their creatures. You know, I would much rather just put both my creatures in front of the 2/3, take the 2 damage, kill their creature, and now our board is 2/2 versus 2/2.
Even in the case of I have 2 1/3s and they have 2 2/2s, I just stack block 1 all day to get that creature off the board permanently. Or
well, if you have 1/3s, you're not at risk of losing any creature. So that's another thing. You're sacrificing your life total because you could just put both your 1/3s in front of these 2 powered creatures, take 0 damage. But 100% of the time, I will stack block on that 2/2, take the damage from the other creature, and get that other creature off the board.
And then the other one I have written here is so silly because it's so obvious, but Ninja of the Deep Hours, just
you should block that. If
block
you can.
that. It's a real card they get in their hand, a real bona fide Magic card straight to their hand, and I don't care about your 1/1, your 2/2. Like everything just goes in front of that card.
Yeah. Since you brought this up, this is a little bit off topic because it's not blocking, but it's removal. If your opponent attacks you and you wait until Declare Blockers is done, like, but then try to kill it before damage, they can still ninjutsu. So you either need to kill that thing before, or you need to just take a hit.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're down a card and they're drawing a card with their ninja. Just a pro tip for everyone at home.
Yeah, and that's second nature to me now, but it wasn't always. I when I very first started Pauper, I got blown out because, like, that's when you cast your stuff is the last possible moment. Like Instinitis, you gotta wait until their turn to play your instant because you can play it on their turn. Like,
right.
No, if Ninja exists in their deck, you should just almost just main phase it, right?
Yeah, you kill their creature that you can't block, or you take the hit. Yeah. Like, between the time that blocks can be made and the time that damage resolves, your opponent has that entire window to resolve a Ninja of the Deep Hours. And I'd rather take 1 damage from a Spell Stutter Sprite than lose my removal spell to a Ninja of the Deep Hours because I got angsty. No blocks, Well, this happened at GP Vegas, and that's why I'm bringing this up, because I had multiple opponents actually try to do this to me. I would attack. I would look at them, and they would go, no blocks. And I go, cool, pass priority? And they would go, before damage, this. And I go, ninja. And they go, oh, but I already said no blocks, and then you didn't ninja. And I'm like, well, it's still an unblocked creature.
And I passed priority even, and then you decided to give it to me again.
Yeah.
How nice of you, with some icing on top.
Please, 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 don't do this. Okay. That was my soapbox rant, but let's get back on topic.
Next, what we were talking about was waiting until the last possible moment to block, and I wanted to find exactly like some rules that I have for defining the last possible moment. One of the rules of thumb that I use is you basically look at the cards in their hand and you imagine that they're burn spells. If they're playing burn or pump spells, right? If they could have 4 Galvanic Blasts in their hand, that's a lot. If they could have 2 Galvanic Blasts in their hand, that's 8. So you need to keep your life total above 8. So the last possible moment in that case is before that. Like I've seen a Boros player have 3 cards in their hand, and I'm like, I can't drop below 12 here. If I drop below 12, I could just die on the spot. This 1/1 is not worth that block. And it's a good rule of thumb. Like, the same goes for Delver, because they have Lightning Bolt in their deck as well. Dropping below 3, 6, and 9 are crucial moments, because that means that they could just have those in their hand, like bolt you, untap, bolt you. That's how I lost at GP Vegas. Like, there was nothing I could do about it, but that I had counted that up, and I was like, oh, I'm probably just going to die here, and I did. Some other things you need to kind of consider, I guess, is Ninja is an extra point of damage. So even if the card doesn't matter at that stage in the game, they can return a creature to their hand and do an extra point of damage. So you kind of need to factor that into, I guess I want to call it your virtual life total. It's like your life total minus all of the damage you could potentially take this turn. And that's what's most important. You're trying to keep that above 0. Like, if your virtual life total drops below 0, you could just lose at any second. So I guess the same thing goes for Vines of Vastwood. Like, jump block makes sense there. If you're at 6, they're attacking with a 2/2. That means you're at 0 if you don't block. So I guess the basic formula is like the number of damage you're going to take from the attack plus the number of damage they could have in their hand. And that's your virtual life total that you need to stay above.
So the next thing that we kind of want to touch on is sort of combat tricks, interacting in combat. One of the biggest things is when you see what is on the surface, a weird attack. So you've got a 5/5 and your opponent attacks with their 2/2. You know, they probably have a trick or they're bluffing or whatever. You know, and so then you've got to think about, like, is my creature worth trading for their card in hand? Because at the end of the day, they use a combat trick, you're still 1-for-1-ing. I mean, unless the combat trick doesn't save the creature, and then you're 2-for-1-ing. You're just trading your creature for their creature and their spell in hand.
And the only way that gets more profitable is if you can draw an instant speed kill spell, so that you can 2-for-1 them when they go to do that trick. And most of the time when they make that attack, they're not going to cast that trick unless you block. Like, unless it's going to outright kill you, right?
Yeah.
So I say most of the time, just kind of, if they have a trick, just force them to have it. Like,
yeah, I think it also just depends on how valuable your creature is. You know, if it's sort of keeping you stable, maybe I don't want to risk my creature for whatever spell is in their hand. I would rather keep my creature on board and try to figure out some other way to deal with their threats. I don't know. I think it kind of comes up to context. Another thing that I was kind of thinking about, and one of the matches I played last night is sort of what spawned this, but it's free attacks. And so I know we're talking about blocking, but I think understanding what a free attack is kind of helps you decide when you are okay to block and when you shouldn't block. And a free attack is basically just like, I attack here because I can get in this free point of damage with no repercussions. My example from last night is I had a flyer, and then I had a 0/4 Trailblazer, and they had a 2/2. And I just attacked with both. I attacked with my flying guy, and I attacked with my 0/4. And my opponent just didn't block the 0/4. I mean, obviously, because he was going to take 0 damage anyway, but it was sort of just a curious, like, I don't know, mind experiment that I wanted to do to see, like, would he block in fear of me, you know, pumping and him wanting to conserve his life total?
Yeah, and those attacks,
like,
a lot of the time,
would he
conceal
not?
when you
Like,
actually have something you want to do on that guy. Like, I attack with Eldrazi spawn tokens a lot, just so that if I decide I do want to attack and I do plan on pumping, they don't know which is the bluff, and like, okay, why is he attacking now? He could have attacked every other turn. Now this seems suspicious.
Something must have changed.
Yeah.
So, you know, taking your free attacks is always good, but then recognizing when your opponent has a free attack or is taking what looks like a free attack because a lot of time that can dictate when you block. If your opponent just, I've seen some things on the Pro Tour. I can't remember the exact match it was, but someone did it to Owen Turtenwald, where Owen knew it was a free attack, his opponent knew it was a free attack, and Owen just still didn't block because it was just like, it's not worth the risk. He understood that like the chances of me getting punished for blocking here are so small, but there was zero downside for him to attack. It's not like he was making this huge bluff. I wish I could remember the match it was and point you guys to it, but it was one of those things that was just really cool to watch. And the commentators were both like, yeah, they both knew exactly what was going to happen here. And Owen just took his damage. He was just like, I understand that you probably have nothing, that this is a free attack or disguised as a free attack. But if I block here and you do have something, it's so devastating for me. So recognizing when your opponent can do that and when they can't can, I think, really help dictate your decision when you're blocking, whether you're taking that damage or whether you're like, I'm safe here to trade my creature for a spell in your hand. I'm fine conserving my life total and then getting a card out of your hand. That's okay.
So I don't have anything to say about that. I do kind of want to loop back a little bit around about combat tricks and deciding on whether or not to block. Like, if they're going to use their mana to play that pump spell, like deciding when you want to get it out of their hand, a lot of the time earlier is better because you're denying their ability to play something post-combat with that same mana. Like, if you block and then they vines, they're down 2 mana, whereas the next turn, if you didn't, post-combat they just play another bear, and then now they're attacking with 2 guys, and they still have the vines in hand. So I say just go for it earlier, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's all I have to say about that.
They're gonna have that card in their hand in 2 turns, and so you might as well not wait. Like, let's get that out of their hand now, get that out of the way so that I can move on, and worry about something else instead of waiting, taking that damage, and then waiting, and then now you're at a point where, okay, I've got to worry about combat trick now that I was worried about 2 turns ago. I've got to worry about all these other new things that my opponent has done. I guess, I don't know.
Yeah.
Again, it's sort of just, it's really hard. This topic's hard because so much of this is contextual.
Yeah.
It's really hard to just kind of give you the nuts and bolts.
Oh yeah, there's not hard and fast rules. That's what makes Magic great. Like, weighing, like, do I deny them the tempo? Do I just get that out of their hand? I lose my creature, or do I wait for the kill spell? Those are both of those are huge things you both want. I don't leave it up to my top deck most of the time. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, you kind of got to just assume that, I don't know, people say that all the time, like, well, you have X card in your deck, so I'm like, yeah, but I could just not draw it. Like,
it's in my deck. That's the problem.
I have to base the decisions of this game on the resources I have available to me now.
Yeah.
Not what I could draw in 2 turns. Like, I understand when you're drawing to an out, as in, like, you have no other options except to actually just draw a card, and so you're doing everything you can to give yourself the most draw steps. But, like, first you need to find a way to win the game with the resources and the spells given to you.
Yeah, and if it's not in your hand, you might as well. It doesn't matter if it's in your deck. Like, it's the same thing. It's like people are like, "Oh, I milled your good cards." It's like, well, good thing they were never on the battlefield or my hand.
Yeah, you could have milled my bad card and then let me draw my good card. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, that card could have also been on the bottom of my library and I never drew it anyway, milled or not milled. Like,
yeah,
none of that stuff is relevant, so don't think about it. I mean, corner case scenarios, this card is my only way to win the game. I have to do everything I can to draw it. That sometimes is the case, but a lot of times you can just navigate a board based on what you have available to you, and you can find a way to win. So
I think we have some just wrap up points here.
Okay.
Just with stack blocking, I would rather trade 3 cards for their 3/3 than using my 3 cards to jump block one at a time and just losing all of them outright. Like, I'm getting a third of a card for each of these rather than 0 with jump blocking. And that's one of the reasons you just wait as long as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like just the term that we use, chump blocking. You know, that just sounds bad, right? Like if you're chump blocking, you're in a bad position. So chump block as little as possible.
Yeah.
You know, don't chump block for the sake of chump blocking, because then you're just a chump. Don't be a chump. Bit of common knowledge for you guys right there.
There's, of course, like sacking your creature after blocks. I'll just mention it, I guess. Blocking and then bolting your own creature to prevent lifelink.
Yeah, or if you just have a sack outlet, use your sack outlet. I played against an affinity player last night with Heroic. I attacked him with, like a 6-powered lifelink Trailblazer, and they blocked it. And I was just like, oh, okay, well, I lose now because I'm dead on the return. I forgot that he could sack it, and I'm not going to gain life. And he just didn't sack it, and I gained 6 life. So, like, it was sort of a snowball effect that, like, my bad attack led to his bad block. But it's like I shouldn't have attacked because I left myself dead to the crackback if he had a Teamer Battle Rage. But my opponent just didn't sack his guy, and I gained 6 life.
I guess I called them wrap-up points, but there's one that might be a bigger topic. And tell me how much you want to go into this. Putting creatures in your deck specifically for blocking. What do you think about that?
I honestly don't know if I've ever thought about that in deck building. Like, I mean, I guess
you don't even consider it.
I guess like Augurobolus. I mean, okay. I guess I consider it a lot when I'm playing limited, but in constructed, I don't know that I've ever considered it. Like, I don't know. Look at the decks I play.
Okay.
None of the creatures in Mono Blue Delver are good at blocking. That's the point of those creatures is to have them not be blocked because they're attacking. Because I'm going to ninja them.
Augur of Bolas is that card, isn't it? I guess it's not specifically
I don't think Augur of Bolas is in the deck because, this block's great. I think Augur of Bolas is in the deck because it's a powerful source of card advantage.
And as a side effect.
Not card advantage, but yeah, as a side effect, it can block. But like,
I think that brings up what I'm feeling.
I think I would play Augur of Bolas if it was like a 1/2. Well, I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't. Maybe we wouldn't play it if it didn't have 3 toughness.
I might think not. But who knows? I think what you brought up with Augur of Bolas is a good point of like, if it does something else that's forwarding your plan, like, that's a good card. It's really a 2-for-1. Like, you get a card, you get a 1/3. That's fantastic. If you're just playing a wall, we know that's all bad. And one of the reasons is you're putting that creature in your deck specifically to block. Like, that is every creature's worst mode, in my opinion, is blocking. That's why I think there's no really great decks with Penumbra Spider in it. It's best at blocking, and that's not a good mode. You're giving your opponent the choice, and everyone knows that that's a bad thing to do, of give your opponent a choice of like, I won't attack. Well, your creature did nothing now. And it did nothing for 6 turns because they've waited 6 turns. Now they're attacking. And it did nothing again because now you're dead. Because it only blocked 1 creature. I guess it held them off that long, but I avoid it like the plague.
Right. It's sort of like if you're blocking, you got to think that like in most scenarios, blocking is a losing proposition.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can have effective blocks, and I think that's why it's important, for us to have talked about this. But most of the time, if you're blocking, especially if you're chump blocking, you're in a bad position. And I think that most decks are designed in a way that they're trying to put the opponent on the back foot not be on the back foot and then try to stabilize themselves.
The best blocks are always where you use the blocking in tandem with a spell, because they're going to make a good attack every time. They're going to make the best attack possible where they don't lose that many creatures. The only time that blocks are profitable or good is either when they made a bad attack to begin with, or you had a spell in your hand that made it a bad attack on their side.
Right.
I think that, yeah, people don't just make bad attacks. If someone's making a bad attack, they're a bad opponent. You don't play to win against bad people. You always assume your opponent is doing something smart and good.
Right. Okay, well, I think that should about wrap it up for our main topic.
Remember your basics! And not your lands, like your basic skills. Come on, guys.
Your fundamentals.
Yeah, there you go.
We're going back to basics on common knowledge. Your dual lands don't untap. Cool. All right. Well, that was our main topic for this week, episode 34 of Common Knowledge. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, week out, and listening to us blabber on. We really do appreciate your guys' support. It means the world to us. Ways you can support us outside of just tuning in and downloading the show, listening to it. You can go to patreon.com/common knowledge. Become Patreon there. We've got our stretch goal. We're only $15 off of our first stretch goal, the 5-card blind tournament, which, as we did announce, will be open to everybody, not just patrons. But we have to hit that $50 threshold before it becomes open to everyone. So if you're interested in that, go to the Patreon page, and you can see all the rules and details about that awesome incentive there. Patrons also have the Brandon versus Lobbert videos where just hilarity ensues, I think. They're usually just craziness. But yeah, you can go check those out. If you guys want to email the show, you can do so at commonknowledgemtg@gmail.com. We had an email today, and I was super excited when I saw that we had an email today, and then it was just like a phishing spam.
Dang it.
Hey, Common Knowledge, improve your business by doing these great things. And I was just like, oh, I thought we had an email. We get so excited when you guys send us emails. So if you got anything to say to us, questions, not a question, you just want to say hello, just send us an email. We love it.
Show topics, literally, just do it. Just anything.
We want to make what you guys want to hear. And so if you email us and say, I want you guys to make a show about this, we might not do it next week, but we're going to definitely put it into our folder and documents of shows, and we'll do a show about it eventually.
It might be next week, though.
It also just might be next week. Sometimes we stretch to try to find topics. Let's see. So what did I say? I said we got our email, we got our Patreon thing, our sponsor, puremtgo.com. Check them out for all the awesomeness, and our newest sponsor, Inked Gaming. So we've got a sweet coupon code that you guys can use there. It's CCMTG10. So go and use that whenever you buy merchandise from Inked Gaming, and we get a small kickback from that. So you help support the show while getting all the pimp swag that Inked Gaming supplies. I was looking at some of their stuff earlier today, and they've got some awesome play mats, and it looked like sleeves, mouse pads, just custom stuff there. So go check out Inked Gaming and use the coupon code CCMTG10 on checkout.
All caps, no spaces.
All caps, no spaces. Boom. So Sean, where can the listeners find you if they want to contact you outside of the podcast?
You can find me on Twitter at Lobbert8. That's Lobbert, and then the number 8. And you can also find me on YouTube if you just search for Lobbert. Where can they find you, Brandon?
You can also find me on Twitter at bclark_ck. And if you want to find the show, you can do that also on Twitter at CK Podcast MTG. You can also find the show on the Constructed Criticism YouTube page, where you'll also be able to check out all the other great Constructed Criticism podcasts and everything else in our network. So go to the YouTube page, Smash that like button. Subscribe. Yeah.
Yeah, and check out all the other cool shows on the Constructive Criticism Network. There's a podcast for pretty much every format you want to play.
Yeah. Boom. Sweet, guys. Thanks so much for listening. And I guess we'll see y'all next week.
Bye. See you next time.
Bye. Bye forever.